Good afternoon and welcome to the Federal Executive Forum, now celebrating 20 years of profiling excellence in government IT mission programs. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders with our secure cloud strategies and solutions. With me on today's show are Louis Copland, Program Executive Officer, PEO Digital and Enterprise Services, Department of Navy; Dr. Edward Mays, Deputy Chief Information Officer and Infrastructure Support Services Lead, U.S. Customs and Border Protection; David Rouse, Senior Director of Defense and National Security at Verizon; Paul Kurtz, Chief Security Advisor and Field CTO at Splunk; and Chris Saunders, Director of Public Sector Solutions Engineering at Wiz. Louis, we're going to start with you at the Department of Navy. A lot of moving parts going on over there. You all are instrumental in going out, foraging that technology, making sure it gets incorporated into these solutions. Give us the top line state of the state as to how things are going there.
Yeah, good afternoon, Luke. Happy to be here. We are really excited about the progress we're making on a variety of fronts where we bring cloud native technologies to bear, ashore and afloat in all domains. Really, the name of the game is zero trust, and how are we incorporating zero trust mindsets and methodologies to progressively improve our cyber posture. And the great thing about zero trust is it also improves customer experience. So we're really solving problems for a lot of different communities who have struggled to get their job done with enterprise services, now being able to do so through these zero trust technologies like virtual desktops, remote access methodologies with multi-factor authentication, and the migration of data and work into more mature hyperscale cloud environments.
Yeah, that zero trust architecture, that framework really gives you a North Star to work with there. And I'm pleased to see that that's the maturity of that being incorporated across the community is really rising. So hats off to the Navy there. Dr. Edward Mays, I know you all are on a tear over there. And quite frankly, I would say, for all intents and purposes, very much in the lead as far as DHS is concerned, being the largest operating component over there. Give us a top line as to where you all are on this journey.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today and allowing me to represent CBP, with this huge mission that we have of protecting the American people, safeguarding our borders, and ensuring economic prosperity for the nation. When you say that, what does that mean with respect to the cloud and securing the cloud? Right? It's a huge task, and we've been on this journey for about 9 years. And we've got 232 applications in the cloud out of a possible 276. And some of, and these aren't simple, small applications, right? These are the applications that actually safeguard our nation. When you look at things like the automated commercial environment, or you look at trusted traveler, or all of these, right? What I can tell you is the cloud has made life so much better for us in terms of being able to make changes, scalability, reliability, elasticity, all those things that the cloud was designed for. So when we have changes in tariffs, if you will, that's a big topic of today. We can make these in hours versus weeks, right? So that whole thing about CI/CD pipelines has really sped up our operations. Now the challenge, obviously, is with all these new capabilities, how do you secure it? And I think we've made incredible strides with respect to zero trust, and we're on the cutting edge of some newer technologies that are under zero trust that are going to allow us to really bring a higher level of security to our cloud. So and I'm excited about where we are. I'm excited about being in technology, and DHS and CBP, we are forging ahead.
It really is quite impressive, the real-time activity that we're talking about. Every person that crosses a land border, every vehicle, every person that comes into the country, and then throw on top of that the ever-changing dynamics around tariffs, et cetera. It's a highly secure, real-time, and right smack in the middle of the commerce of America. So hats off to all of you for everything you're doing over there 24 hours a day, 365. David, none of this can happen unless we've got the pipes in place, the airwaves in place to connect all these capabilities together and then provide these secure solutions to these operators. You're in the catbird seat there. You see it across the spectrum. Give us an input as to what you're seeing out there right now. Sort of where is this state of this environment?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Appreciate the opportunity to participate with the team here today. So I think before I dive directly into your question, I'd say, from a consumer of cloud services, we at Verizon leverage many tools in virtualized environments, from our ability to collaborate across the team and with our partners, workflows, and how we can move those through more quickly, leveraging strategic partners we have in that space, and then also looking at the virtualization of different elements of the network that continue to evolve, and so then extending it out to support our customers and their cloud initiatives. I break it down into a couple areas. So one is the core network, and how do we get connectivity at a very high level of performance, and securely connect into these various commercial data centers, cloud providers, amongst agency locations. And then at the edge, big push for connecting any user, any device, anywhere. That's not necessarily new, but more and more virtualization there. And then the other piece I would touch on is, as network functions become more virtualized, software-defined elements, we've recognized the need to continue to raise the bar from a security perspective, and we have taken our SD-WAN product. It is in the FedRAMP marketplace, FedRAMP High ready. So it's a relatively new development that we've worked through. So continuing to look at how we can, further enable our customers to enable their missions and initiatives, and continue, like I said, continue to raise the bar from a security perspective in the process.
It's interesting when you flip everything over to software defined, it certainly unlocks a tremendous amount of capability, real-time changes, et cetera. Also opens up a lot of vectors as you described there. So appreciate all the doubling down to make sure that stays good and hardened and secured for these operators. Paul, how about at Splunk? Splunk's been on this journey, right? You were the king of instrumentation for the very longest time, and now you all have grown into so many other things beyond just what we knew about Splunk 7 and 8 years ago. Give us a top line as to where you are these days in regards to helping secure this environment that's become ever so complex.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the program. And, I think the core capability of Splunk has not changed in terms of servicing customers, and that is to be able to provide data analytics capability for a wide variety of use cases. And that is our core mission. Of course, now with Cisco and Cisco's acquisition of Splunk, we can not only do the data analytics piece, but we have network, the physical network and digital network that we can bring into play as well. So it's a pretty powerful combination. But at the end of the day, what we're really trying to do is help our government customers achieve their goals, but we recognize that FedRAMP High is critical, which we have. Making sure we also have IL5 and all the other certifications that are so critical to government operations, and making sure we bring resiliency to whatever the government needs, whether it's DoD or another agency.
No question that this community, this crowd, we'll call it, that's on this panel, certainly very focused on IL5 and FedRAMP High. So really do appreciate all the work going on there. Chris, Let's talk about Wiz. Some people, a lot of people know what Wiz is. There might be a few that don't. Give us a top line. What is Wiz? Where do you all fit into the ecosystem? And then give us an update as to where we are as far as securing these environments.
Yeah, I think a little background on Wiz.
I just love saying Wiz.
Yeah, it's fun, right? So, and I'm a wizard, and thanks for having us. So, I think when you look at cloud security, the goal of Wiz and our founders from the onset was we had talked to a lot of different CISOs of Fortune 500 companies, and a lot of the traditional security challenges they had on premise, they were tackling the same way in the cloud. And the cloud is very different for many different reasons. And one stark example of that is identity. Identity in on-prem world, typically you know what resources, what VMs, what databases, who has access to those. You have a very formalized process around how you get access to those via tickets and ITIL and all those processes you've built for many years. When you get into the cloud and you start dealing with all these different services from AI, from VMs, from Kubernetes, all these things require access and they require identity. And sometimes those are humans, sometimes those are non-humans. So what we've seen is when you try to take the same tools that you leveraged for preventing attacks in premise and you put that in the cloud, those tools don't get all that context. They don't understand those identities and how those services are related and how they have excessive permissions. They don't know how to correlate all the different parts of the cloud together to help you prioritize risk. So that's what Wiz does. The Wiz way is being able to correlate multiple factors of risk to help you prioritize what is the thing I should fix right now. Imagine if you had a vulnerability on two different workloads. Not all vulnerabilities are the same. They might have both the same critical vulnerability. It might both be exploitable in the wild. They might be both SysACEVs, but the one VM is locked completely behind 18 different firewalls and has no other attached services. You didn't find any secrets on it. You didn't find any malware on it. You didn't find any of those other risk factors that you typically see in cloud attacks versus another workload with the same critical vulnerability exposed to the internet with a secret, with excessive permissions, with malware, with all these other factors of risk that could lead to sensitive data. You should fix that first. And that's the Wiz way.
Yeah, really rack and stack and focusing on the highest impact type of environments. I think it's very important to stay laser focused on there. So I like that a whole lot. Let's talk about specific programs, specific initiatives. David, I'm going to jump up to you at Verizon. Again, you guys in the catbird seat, you get to see across the spectrum, quite frankly, both in the commercial environment, in the federal sector, in the homeland security environment, defense environment. Give us a specific program that you'd like to highlight that's really moving the ball forward in regards to securing these environments.
Well, I think that, again, coming back to what I touched on earlier about the different parts of the architecture, the core network versus, what's happening at the edge, the support that we provide to the DoD research and engineering community, I think is very interesting because it's a lot of forward-looking activity that they're working through. We're definitely seeing that's an area where we're seeing AI come into play significantly. So how is that impacting network architectures, security structures, and so forth? And the high bandwidth, just extremely high bandwidth. And if I get out of the federal space for just 1 second, my counterparts on the enterprise side of the business that work closely with hyperscalers, the demand signal is it's unprecedented. In my 30+ year history working in the telco space, networking space, the demand that's coming, that's here for some folks and coming soon for others, as AI becomes more and more part of the back office, the daily operations, what's being pushed out to the edge of these networks, the amount of data and so forth is is unprecedented, quite frankly. So how do we adjust the architecture to meet that demand, but do it in a secure way? And working with the research and engineering community is very, to me, is very interesting, very intellectually stimulating, some of the work they're doing, and how we can respond to meet the challenges they're presenting from a networking and a security perspective.
Yeah, AI really is the killer app in regards to consumption of bandwidth. But I think the more you provide, the more they're going to obtain. So we really appreciate you all staying in front of that. Lewis, how about over at the Department of Navy, a specific program you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I'd really like to highlight the work we've been doing with our flank speed, Zero Trust Microsoft 365 environment. We were able to last year reach the DoD target of Zero Trust accomplishment 3 years early. And beyond that target level, we were able to hit 151 of the 152 advanced activities. So that was really exciting. We have the same thing on the Marine Corps side called Hyperion. And beyond just checking boxes in terms of Zero Trust capabilities, what this means is it's changed the way that we can deliver workloads to users. So I mentioned our Nautilus Virtual Desktop. When our previous VPN solution went down, we were able to scale that from 25,000 to 150,000, and now over 200,000 users. That was all secure cloud infrastructure. It really ramped up with few to no hiccups, and was in fact more secure than the previous VPN solution. So that was really exciting. We were able to take older applications that hadn't modernized, and instead of making exceptions to allow them to function, we were able to wrap them in their own virtual desktop instance and segregate them from the rest of the data and the workloads. So we're really seeing a shift in how we think about planning for operational resilience, improving that customer experience, and piloting new technologies.
I love the fact that you can accelerate the implementation and yet come up with something that's a little bit more modernized in using perhaps a different modern technique. So I think that's an awesome use case, and we really do appreciate it. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about secure cloud environments, specifically talking about use cases. I want to highlight a program. Dr. Mays, I know you have, I'm sure, a variety of programs that you'd like to highlight. You want to give us a whopper here?
Sure. I think for instance, security is changing, and how we do security, right? One of the things that's really interesting is multi-cloud, right? And I know we haven't talked about that yet here, but
tricky one.
Yes, and so our basic program is we're both using Microsoft, and we're using some things in Amazon, and looking at how do we ensure that both sides are secure. Also, how do we fail over these days, as well. Those are huge challenges. We talked about it theoretically, and we did it on the small scale. Now we're doing it on large. But how do you actually ensure that you've got all the logging on both places, and that you marry them up, right? And that you can ensure that you've got ground truth. And that's one of those things that we had to figure out a new way of thinking. And I think we've done a good job. And I think we're going to see more of that, especially when you start to look at hybrid cloud as well. We are going to be leaving our data center, hopefully within the next 2 years, if we get the funding that we're anticipating this year. So if that occurs, now we've got to figure out what that looks like between a back-end CSP versus what we have on-prem, and that data that's either at rest or in motion or in the cloud. So there's a lot of challenges. Now, the place that I think we're going to get the big value from is post-quantum cryptography, and we're working some pilots this summer. We were one of the first in government to actually approach this a couple of years back, but now we really got to get serious about doing this on the large. So, and we're going to choose one of our applications that's underway right now in terms of which one we're going to use for this. But it's one of the secretary's key focuses when she came on board. So we want to make sure we get to that this summer.
It's really interesting you point out this multi-cloud, very tricky environment there. And when you're operating real time, thousands of transactions a second, of which you all are certainly, gets really tricky to do that. So hats off on you all to sort of blaze that trail and really pressure test the hell out of that and make sure it works as designed, so to speak. Paul, how about at Splunk? Can you give us a specific example that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think, we help so many government agencies, but I think the one that kind of pops for me the most is supporting DoD in the IL5 cloud environment. And DoD required a secure, scalable, compliant cloud solution to help manage controlled unclassified information. And in that context, supporting mission critical cybersecurity analytics and AI use cases. And we were able to deliver that. And the Splunk cloud platform achieved IL5 authorization, which is, for those most people, I think most of your listeners probably know what this is, but it's the highest standard for unclassified data in U.S. government cloud. And ultimately, what that enables DoD to do is defense agencies can now use the cloud for real-time cybersecurity monitoring, mission analytics, compliance, and supporting national security and operational resilience. And name of the game is making sure DoD can do its job securely, and do it also in a resilient manner and in a resilient way. And I think this is a good solid example of where Splunk is at least supporting the DoD community.
And really stepped up the game there. We certainly do appreciate it. That is not an easy task for anybody to achieve that capability, and very much required in regards to the DoD spaces you're describing. When did you all become IL5? Just curious there.
24.
24. Fantastic. Really do appreciate that doubling down of that capability. Chris, how about over at Wiz? You all entered the scene red hot. You're building into an environment, sort of getting the lessons learned of the way things were versus the way things should be. Give us an example of how you've been able to really step in front of these capabilities and make them happen.
Well, I think one of the things that any framework has, and I like how Lewis talked about how zero trust is great for the end user, and it actually has those outcomes that they desire and improves their day-to-day experience. I think for us, when you look at what Wiz is really looking at, we're not necessarily looking at the endpoint or the access from the user to the device. We're looking at the underlying cloud infrastructure that supports all of that. We're looking at the security posture of those Amazon services those apps consume, the VMs, EC2, and the AI has been mentioned earlier. Is something else that we're looking at. And the biggest challenge with all these frameworks, with zero trust or anything, you have to know what you're assessing for risk. How do you assess AI for risk? Well, before you even get there, you have to know if you have it. So one of the things we've seen with a lot of our customers is they don't have a great inventory or visibility of their clouds, especially Dr. Mays pointed out a multi-cloud environment. If you've got Google, Amazon, and Azure, do you know what's running in those clouds? Specifically, do you know if an end user is using Bedrock or a DeepSeek model as an AI in your environment? So getting the inventory of all the things that you need to assess in the cloud is job one for zero trust or any other framework. So one of the things Wiz is built upon is cloud native. We use the APIs from the cloud providers. This enables us so we can quickly deploy into a customer's environment or connect to a customer's environment and understand what are all those services they're consuming. We can see if there is someone using an AI model that you don't want in your environment. And that really helps you begin that journey of understanding the visibility of really what is happening in these clouds. So that's the number one thing that we typically help customers with, especially in the federal government, is that visibility. And often it's like, hey, we have good visibility on premise, but I'm not quite confident of all the things happening in the cloud, especially with these new technologies happening so fast at a rapid pace, like AI. And Wiz really focuses on understanding what are all those services that you're consuming in your clouds.
Staying ahead of the power curve. We really do appreciate that. Let's talk about priorities for this year. David, I'm going to ask you first at Verizon. I know you all are working on a lot of different things. There certainly has to be some priorities for the federal sector, most notably Homeland and Department of Defense. Where's the focus this year for you all?
Well, I think, one of the big pieces we're working through, which I think ultimately there is a cloud element that will ultimately come into play here, but there's still a lot of voice transformation work, a lot of TDM elimination, not sexy stuff when it comes to cloud and security.
We're still eliminating TDM. My God,
yeah.
Come on.
But we're still working through some of that with our government partners.
Sure.
And I bring that up because that some of this legacy technology debt, however you want to categorize it, it does introduce an element of increased security vulnerabilities. And so we recently published our data breach investigations report with a number of contributors around the globe into that. So it's definitely a team effort, and seeing how much the attacks have increased, especially looking globally from a geopolitical perspective. Attacks in Europe up dramatically. Attacks through third parties. So as folks are brought into an architecture, how well is that done? How securely is that done? Is it creating a potential backdoor into an organization? Credential, that was brought up earlier in the discussion here about the importance of identity and credentialing. That remains a top vulnerability is misuse and stealing of credentials. So security is always top of mind for us. And I think looking more forward back to the SD-WAN conversation, that's a big focus for us, is getting that FedRAMP High SD-WAN capability out there into customers' hands as another tool in the toolkit to secure the enterprise architectures.
You mentioned the vulnerability assessment report that you all do. Just for the audience, they're extremely comprehensive. We all look forward to reading that. We'll make sure we get that published out on our website too. So appreciate all the resources that go in to make that available as a comprehensive knowledge base for us to make good decisions off of. Dr. Mays, ton of priorities that you all have it going on over there. Curveball after curveball. Every time you turn on the TV, there seems to be a new twist and a new turn. What are the top couple of 3 priorities that you all are really focusing your attention on, must get done this year?
Well, I'd like to answer that, but I also want to point out one other thing. So as we were talking about cloud and cloud security, and I heard again and again throughout this discussion, vulnerabilities, right? One of my biggest challenges, whether it's in the cloud or anywhere else, is the applications that are being run or provided by vendors, right? And the high amount of vulnerabilities that I have to deal with, right? Which means my automation, I do about 43 million patches per year. So that's a lot of cyber hygiene. So one of the things that we're focusing on is engaging our vendor base and saying, your product has to be better, right? Because we spend an inordinate amount of time in government resources monitoring and fixing and so on, where, a 10% better product changes my life and the lives of our organizations dramatically. So, the things that we're going to be focusing on are governance in terms of cybersecurity, how we're doing business. Now we've got a great CISO and his team is awesome, but internally to where we sit from an infrastructure perspective and an app team perspective, what more can we do to help tighten down the environment that we have? Focusing more on data analytics. Are we seeing unusual behaviors, right? And being able to respond to them quickly. I mean, we've seen that quite a bit. There are lots of threats or threat actors out there that will claim things, and we spend a lot of time validating if it's real in our environment. Knock on wood, it's one of those things where we've been very, very fortunate thus far. But you still spend a lot of time trying to figure out if what's being said is actually true. And then, just ensuring, the basic things around a cloud in terms of looking at our scalability and complexity with respect to the threat landscape. That's a new thing that we're doing as well. How do we understand, the impact of threats? I think when we started the discussion, someone said all vulnerabilities, even though they may be the same, are different or are weighed differently in different environments. So that's a challenge as well. Where do you spend your limited resources? So those are the big things that we're doing. And in addition, like I mentioned, we are going to continually pursue cutting edge, things to enhance our network security and to build out new capabilities such as PQC to ensure that, we can at least encrypt our high value assets.
Really appreciate that focus and a good call out on the secure by design. I know that Jen Easterly was a big proponent of that. I'm sure the incoming CISA director will be as well. So hats off on that activity. Paul, let's go over to you and talk about top priority for Splunk this year. I know you guys, again, lots of different things going on, probably getting a lot of demand signals in. What's the number one thing that you all are focused on this year?
Yeah, so I think top priorities for us are deepening AI integration and automation. That shouldn't necessarily become, it shouldn't be a big surprise to anybody listening out there. Obviously, we need to make sure we're leveraging AI and automation as best as we can in order to bring down mean time to detect, mean time to respond for our customers. Number two, I think, would be making sure we're enhancing cybersecurity and regulatory compliance. And by the way, Luke, I did misspeak, excuse me, earlier. We became FedRAMP compliant in 24 and IL5 in 22. So I mixed up my
Wow,
dates, unfortunately.
very impressive. Hats off.
Okay. So, I think the third area that I would flag as a priority would be streamlining platform experience for our customers. It's really important, and I think this is where AI plays a big role. We've already brought AI into the platform, is making life easier for analysts, making it so that they don't necessarily have to write out a script, a report on their own, that we can generate a report automatically as to what is happening within the system. And then the final area I think I would flag would be cloud and hybrid deployment focus, making sure that we are being very flexible in the ways that we support government agencies. And one of the things that is really important now is federated data. Putting data in certain places to support different use cases, hot data versus cold data. We're doing that a lot now for many customers, and so this is clearly an advancement in the cloud. But those would be, I think, the standout
Sure.
developments on the Splunk side.
A lot of major focus areas. I really do appreciate it. Lewis, how about at the Department of Navy? I'm sure you all have a lot of moving parts over there. What's your top 2 or 3 priorities that you all are focusing on, sort of must-dos for this year?
Yeah, there is a lot going on, and some of it really echoes some of the themes that others have spoken to. Dr. Mays and Chris talked about multi-cloud, absolutely a priority for us as well. We're not an Azure-only shop. We have a huge AWS footprint, working with Google and Oracle, so we have all the hyperscalers, and we're really pushing this Cloud 3.0 concept to make sure we are using cloud-native services, infrastructure as code, so on. We're also working with those same hyperscalers to do a ubiquitous transport effort we call naval exchange points, where we're bringing this bring your own bandwidth concept to the colos and the meet me points, and really making this very high speed networking capability from our commercial providers available across the shore and afloat, because then that enables these cloud services, secure cloud services at the tactical edge. And where we're going there is some pilots we call flank speed edge and flank speed wireless, which allow us to bring these cloud native services and very high performance commercial bandwidth, commercial PLEO SATCOM into the afloat environment to extend the zero trust capabilities into those spaces. We're also looking at expanding these same services into classified environments. And as everyone's mentioning, certainly making sure that we have efficient and effective access to enterprise AI and LLM services. So a lot going on across the board.
A lot of focus area there and a lot to get done in 2025. So we really appreciate all the doubling down. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We are talking about secure cloud computing, specifically talking about priorities for 2025, must-dos. Chris, I'm going to throw it over to you at Wiz. What is the focus for this year for you all?
It really hits on some of the things that Dr. Mays was saying. We have these challenges, and our customers have these challenges of all this third-party risk, right? Even their own risks, their own vulnerabilities. And all that patching and all that time spent doing that is expensive. And that's also interrelated to the threat actors. Threat actors exploit those vulnerabilities. And for Wiz, the way that our founders have seen this is the way we were dealing with the risk on-prem was very focused on the workload, especially with threat detection and threat actors. And the context they have is really limited to maybe the operating system. Cloud attacks are way different. Those threat actors are going to take advantage of that third-party risk from other vendors. They are going to exploit those. But you also have to have visibility into the blast radius. And I think that's what Dr. Mason hit on, is like, what is the actual impact? Are there false positives? How do we know this is a real threat? So those threat actors, they don't care about any of that, right? They're going to exploit that third-party vulnerability, and they're going to do things to exfiltrate data out of your Amazon, out of your Google. And at Wiz, what we're focused on is being able to scan across your source code repositories, across your cloud APIs, within the workload, and being able to pull in logs from those cloud providers. And I'll give you an example of where we're seeing abnormal behavior and where this come in. You might have a third-party exploit been exploited in the wild by some vendor you have. You might have a malicious actor from a VM in a foreign nation accessing your cloud environment, and it's hitting a VM, and through that, it's exfiltrating data on an S3 bucket that IP's never touched before. That's an abnormal behavior. And you want to be able to, as a federal entity, catch that and not spend time on those false positives. So our priorities for this year at Wiz is really helping customers to be able to scan multiple points in their cloud, their code, their logs, versus traditionally we have a scanner from a different vendor to cover different security domains. You've got a container scanner, you've got a GitHub scanner, you've got your vulnerability scanner, you've got identity scanners, secret scanners, all different companies, all different vendors. None of that's correlated. You've got cloud logs, you've got your SIEM, you've got all these different points of noise, and none of that's correlated together, going to different people. At Wiz, we want to make security less horizontal. Less vertical and more horizontal. We want to be able to democratize that data and be able to correlate all of those things together to help customers figure out what is the most important thing I need to fix now. Hopefully, there's a world where we're not patching 43 million vulnerabilities a year. We're patching the 10,000 that would lead me or lead an attacker to get to my sensitive data. That's what our focus is on this year. In addition to that, we want to get FedRAMP High and IOL 5. So that's the other focus we have this year.
Fantastic. And we really do sort of being able to clean up from all the noise that's out there, if you will. But let's roll into lessons learned. Louis, I'm going to start with you. I know that you all are on this journey, you're plowing a path. For the listening audience out there, since you've sort of been there and done that, at least some of it, what's the sort of top 1 or 2 lessons learned that you'd like to impart on the community?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we actually have a publication on this on our website. If you go to the PO Digital website, we have an innovation adoption kit, which talks about our thinking in this area. So one thing we really try and do is make sure that we have a standard way to talk about things. We did not have a consistent way to talk about capabilities and products and services, and we call them different things. It makes it very hard to focus on the new and kill off the old and assess value, essentially to check your spelling when you can't agree on the alphabet. So having a standard way to talk to each other is a kind of a prerequisite. We talk a lot about our technology investment horizons. We tend to, especially in DoD, focus on things at scale, long-lived, very mature, where we can say over a 2 to 7 year budget horizon, precisely what it'll cost to deliver precisely what, and that we can analyze on the front end 100% of risk. That's not the way to foster innovation. And these tech horizons help us create a safe space. In Horizon 3, we look at other people's money, which is the best type of money. So things, that DARPA is doing that might be of interest. In Horizon 2, we put our own money and we start to pilot. And so that learning by doing, that earning the scale is really critical, because all the front end analysis, all the paper analysis isn't really going to pass muster. There's so much amazing commercial tech, and oftentimes the government buys the right solution and trips on the integration and the interoperability. So you have to start small, do those pilots, have that lean startup mindset. And that gives us a safe space to fail forward, to learn, and to get better. And finally, we really ask industry to come to us and pitch these pilots in terms of a lean business case. We publish our world-class alignment metrics, how we measure value, just 5 areas, and say, tell us, you've worked with other federal agencies, you've worked with the civilian sector. Tell us how you're going to improve customer experience by 40% or cut cost by user by 15%. And we keep it short and simple and get right to the pilot.
Really appreciate those words of wisdom. Dr. Mays, top lessons learned for you all.
So I think one of the biggest lessons is what Mr. Saunders talked about, Mr. Saunders from Wiz, when he talked about really understanding your environment and knowing what's there and how things interact. We're focusing on that in a big way. We stood up an organization called Operational Technology. And operational technology looks at CBP writ large, how we interact with U.S. Border Patrol, how we interact with AMO and OFO. We've had, some significant challenges over the past couple of years where we realized that whether it's respect to wearables, drones, and other devices that might be, touching our network at points in time, that we weren't really focusing on, and we found some security gaps. And with that, we stood up an organization to immediately start to address those challenges. So for us, growing operational technology, because sensor fusion is going to get bigger and bigger as we go forward from the IoT plus perspective. So that's going to be one of the biggest things that we focus on, because outside of the standard IT, there's a whole operational world that's out there that uses all these back-end services and our CSPs. So it's one of those things that's critically important to us. and because it also represents a significant threat surface, if you will. So we're going to be addressing that in a big way this year.
Got it. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. We always like to end with this last question, which is fast forward 2 to 3 years, paint a picture of the future, future being, right around the corner, quite frankly. Chris, we're going to start with you at Wiz. You've got some demand signals out there. You've got some stuff that's coming out of the petri dish. What can we expect? What are you all going to be focusing your attention on implementing, encountering 2 to 3 years from now?
I think as we try to define cloud, everyone defines it in different ways, right? And I think as we look at risk in the cloud, how does that tie back into those cloud infrastructure resources you're consuming? Give you an example: Office 365, ServiceNow, Salesforce, Snowflake, all those services, those SaaS services, probably connect to other apps in your cloud, custom apps, other things you're building, data, databases. And what we're looking in the future is, how do you secure those? How do you ensure that you are following best practices, that you don't have excessive permissions? One big breach we saw last year at Snowflake was folks didn't have multi-factor authentication for admins into Snowflake. So how do you identify that's a problem in your environment? So it's really getting into correlating again your cloud infrastructure in the context of those connecting to other SaaS providers and making sure those SaaS services are secure, because the old responsibility matrix, like who's responsible for what's the CSP responsible for, or what am I responsible for? You're still responsible for security in Office 365, ServiceNow, Salesforce. And it's really, how do you start to do the best practices? How do you identify misconfigurations? How do you identify attack paths in the data sitting in those services? And that's really what is in the future here for Wiz this year.
Really appreciate that. And yeah, it's you make those choices on those environments. It's up to you to make sure the whole is secure. Paul, how about at Splunk? 2 to 3 years from now, what's the focus going to be?
Yeah, I think that I think there are several trends out there. One is the application of hybrid multi-cloud and distributed architectures. The idea of one monolithic cloud is not relevant anymore. We're going to have a lot of different needs based upon customers' requirements. So say, for example, we're seeing a lot of customers that indeed have cloud operations, hybrid operations, but very much have a need for on-prem operations. So it's really important for us to make sure we can cover that whole universe of needs among customers. The second thing I would highlight, and I think most everybody would highlight, is AI and automation. Once again, we talked about this earlier in the program, but AI and automation are going to be integral to what we're doing going forward. And that's AI, so to speak, across the board, and helping in many different ways, whether it's coding, whether it's automating the report generation, automation, making sure that you can seamlessly get all the tools to work together in the context of the cloud or a hybrid environment. And then I think I'd be remiss, the third area that I would highlight is compliance is still really important. And so as much as we've have FedRAMP in place and we have IL5 in place, it's really important in the government context that we're doing our best to make sure that we're meeting those compliance requirements. So we may see new needs come into play, especially with the application of AI, that there may be new compliance requirements that ultimately pop. So we want to be flexible and as much as we can to support our customers as the landscape continues to change below our feet.
Right, and good catch on the compliance. And want to make sure that as we get on this compliance journey, it doesn't become the journey. It becomes part of the overall solution. So appreciate you flagging that. David, how about at Verizon? Focus on will be what in 2 to 3 years from now. We've got 5G, we're rolling that out. Got a lot of private and public 5G. Are we going to be talking 6G in 2 to 3 years?
I believe, we'll start to see that become part of the conversation. I think just a little bit tied back to the lessons learned piece. I think one thing that's really important is as we collectively put these solutions together, the architectures, it's really important to know where we're drawing lines and, how we're putting the components together and the second and third order consequences and what needs to be true in one part of the architecture to enable the next piece. 5G has been around for a bit now. We've implemented a nationwide network slice for our frontline platform that supports the first responder community. We've been doing probably more so on the enterprise side, than the government side, but a lot of private 5G deployments. But I think the piece that's important that we'll need to navigate as a collective is as we bring more connected devices online. And I think from like an operational technology perspective, we all know smartphones and tablets and the refresh cycles and so forth. But when it comes to OT, some of those solutions have been in place for quite some time. They'll be refreshed. How will they be connected? Will they be connected through a public connection, a private connection? Will it be cellular enabled, LEO? There's going to be a lot of new tools for all of us to play with. So we've got partnerships in the LEO environment. We work with them from our frontline perspective. How do we leverage each of these capabilities? And then specifically from my world, working with my customers, data sovereignty is a big issue too. So as we look at how to push more capability to the edge of the network on a global basis in today's geopolitical environment, how and where do we put those resources? How are those resources protected? The people who are accessing it, the security around that. And I think those are going to be some really critical decisions here in the next few years that we'll have to work through.
Really
again
do
as a group.
appreciate
So
really do appreciate the forward thinking there. Dr. Mays, 2 to 3 years from now, you're going to have a mastery of your multi-cloud. I'm a freshly minted Border Patrol agent, or maybe I'm a customs officer. What's this environment going to look like 2 to 3 years from now? Am I going to be able to do everything I could do on a desktop on my mobile phone? Where's it all leading?
So absolutely, I think the ultimate support is for the officers and agents in the field, right?
Right
And
on.
we are driving capability to them. I mean, if you look back over the past few years, we've gone from a lot of manual processes to being able to use biometrics, to being able to, scans of, from a mobile device, so a fingerprint, right, to identify people. We're also being able to push all the data from the ports of entry, that sort of thing, in a way that we've never done before. So I see the future as being exponentially growing in terms of capability down to their mobile devices, down to the edge, wherever they happen to be on the border, whether it's north or southern border. But here's what's going to change that I think we have challenges that are coming, right? With the advances of AI, ML, it's going to be everywhere, to include things like metahumans, where you can have a conversation so that an AI can actually interact with you in a very human way and provide information or advice. Ultimately, the human makes a decision, right? So it's a support system. But these things are growing, and I think we have to be prepared for the risks from a security perspective that go along with those. Quantum is coming. I know there are a lot of people that have poked their heads in the sand. I'm not one of them. It's coming. I think we're probably 5 to 7 years or less away. And how do we protect against that? The technology, the underlying technology is changing, CPUs, GPUs, TPUs, and what's going to be next, right? How do you make sure that with these new technologies that, we protect, one, the intellectual property, and also know that what we're getting and placing on our networks is what it says it is. That's a question, and I'm looking at that internally as well, and probably we're going to attempt to partner with the Navy a little bit on this. There's things out there that we've got to be ready for to ensure that we provide that uninterrupted service 24/7 to make sure that we're protecting America's treasure. When I say America's treasure, I mean those young men and women that are defending our nation on the border.
Standing on that front line, we really do appreciate that, and a glimpse into the future there. Louis, take us home from the perspective of the Department of Navy 2 to 3 years from now. What will your organization be focusing on?
Yeah, it's really exciting because the things that we're focusing on now, I think, are going to be really mature and have earned that enterprise scale in 2 to 3 years. The first is multi-domain infrastructure. We're seeing that the physical infrastructure can now provide logical separation, that we can have these different mission use cases of unclassified and various levels of classification in shared environments. A lot of the technologies we're starting to see into these classified domains as well as unclassified. So that's really exciting in terms of being able to invest in these best of breed capabilities that have so many applications. I think we're going to have more mature zero trust approaches to data management and identity, data loss prevention, multi-level data security, all these things that really enable a different way of architecting how we get our digital workflows executed in a way that, again, is more secure and more convenient for customers, enhances that customer experience. And that means, our network diagrams are going to become data and identity diagrams with a little bit of network on the side. I think you're going to see a lot more application services consumed as cloud web streams. We've already seen some of that, AWS AppStream and others. I think you're going to see a lot more folks going that way. We've already seen a lot of movement in the private sector, obviously, into microservice meshes and other things. So I think we're going to see a real maturation and a real uptake of that as it becomes easier to modernize and refactor applications using that approach. And then I think it's going to be ruthless automation everywhere, from robotic process automation all the way up to agentic AI. I'm really confident and hopeful that we're going to reduce daily toil, that everyone's day is going to be easier. You're going to be spending less time on the kind of low value must-dos and more time on the high value, hopefully energizing fun to-dos. And already seeing so much uptake and so much acceleration in this space, I'm confident 2 or 3 years it's going to be orders of magnitude more.
Really do appreciate that, and ruthless automation rules the day, so appreciate that as well. I'd like to thank today's guests for taking the time out of a busy schedule to join us for this program. I'd like to thank all of you, all of our sponsors, for supporting us on this show. I'd like to thank the good people here at Federal News Network that make this program so successful and enjoyable. And most of all, I'd like to thank the listening audience out there that tune in every month. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum, part of the Federal News Network.